and 6, I did think about leaving. And we even did marriage counseling. And I would do everything they told me to do, and he would do nothing. And we went through numerous counselors because, number one, he didn't want a female. And number two, he wanted one that would agree with him and not with me. Over time, I started being very toxic. I became bitter, I became angry, and then we started with the drinking again.
So what makes you decide finally to leave?
My oldest one was a sophomore in high school, and my youngest one was in 7th grade. And I think I was drinking all the time. I mean, I couldn't wait to get home from work or be done with work. And, you know, the alcohol, he drank every night too when he came home, The final straw was he lost control with my older son one night, and right in front of me. And I remember picking up my son off the floor, and I couldn't even say anything to him. I just knew that something had to change. And I actually didn't leave right away. It was almost a year later.
Oh, my.
Yeah. And this continued. And, you know, we had already been pretty much coexisting. We didn't go anywhere together. We drove to church separate even. We still went to church and did our appearance, and everybody thought everything was fine. And I can't actually say that there was a night where we got in an awful fight and I said, I'm done, I'm leaving. It was a night that I was on the phone and he asked me, who are you on the phone with? And I said, none of your business. That's how we talk to each other all the time. And I don't know, something broke at that moment. And I basically told the person I was talking to, I will talk to you later. And I hung up. And I was actually laying in bed. And he had come upstairs, and I said, I'm done. And what do you mean done? I said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. It's destroying me. It's destroying the kids. And basically, I got up out of bed and started to get dressed, and he said, you're not leaving, and I said, I am leaving. And words were exchanged, and some pushing and shoving happened. He left for the night, and I moved out the next morning.
Now, you end up agreeing on the same attorney, I think, for the divorce, and you end up with some pots and pans.
When I left, I had told myself that if I ever can pull it together to leave this mess, I will take nothing.
That's exactly what you did.
That's exactly what I did. I didn't have an attorney. I had no game plan. I called some close friends, and I basically took the boys' bunk bed, one dresser, some of my clothing, a few pots and pans, and a little bit of furniture, and left the rest. I took nothing from the lake. I took the one vehicle that was paid off, it was my vehicle that I drove. I took that vehicle and slept on an air mattress for several months.
I think you ate one meal a day so your kids could eat.
Ate one meal a day because I wanted my kids. One of the things, you know, my boys were pretty distraught over all of it, and it was very hard on them. You know, then they tried to do the weekend visits, and my youngest one stuck with it. My oldest one just couldn't do it anymore. And for a couple of years, didn't talk to his dad. But yes, I moved into an apartment, a very small 2-bedroom apartment with my 2 boys, and proceeded to try to make it work.
And you're drinking, right, during this time?
Yes.
Self-medicating?
I never really could seem to stay away from it. It was how I self-medicated. It was how I slept at night, especially on the weekends at first when one or both of the boys would be with their dad. It was awful. It was awful.
And you think you're hiding it from your sons, right?
Yeah.
And you even switched to an alcohol that didn't have smell.
It smelled like candy. It smelled like candy. My kids never really, they never questioned it. They didn't, I was slick about it. You know, I had bottles hid everywhere all over the apartment. And, you know, my oldest son was probably the first one to come to me and say, you know, when he would come home unexpected and I wasn't there, and then maybe wasn't there till the next morning, you know, he would question me about it a little bit. And I would always say, well, yeah, I went out with so-and-so, and I just didn't want to drive. I didn't want to drive home. The reality of it was I probably didn't know where my car was and couldn't drive home.
Now, during this time period, are you still reading your Bible, going to church?
Yes, yes. I was involved with a very small church at the time. They were amazing people. They were amazing friends. And yes, we were still attending church on Sundays, except for the mornings when I couldn't go. And some of those people actually stepped in. And I had one friend that came over one night, and she said, "We need to pour your alcohol out." And literally, we poured all my alcohol out. And I watched bottle after bottle after bottle getting poured out. And I really thought that once I poured it out, it would be okay, and I probably wouldn't go buy it, because I looked at how much money there was. I was eating one meal a day so that my kids could eat. And I was spending all this money. You know, I started adding it up, and I was like, kind of floored at how much I was spending on alcohol.
Did you even go to church drunk a few times?
Yeah. There was a few times where I would go to church and I would have to hang on to the chair in front of me because I was still intoxicated from the night before.
And after you pour out the alcohol, do you stay sober for a while, or do you go buy more alcohol the next week?
I didn't buy any for quite a while. That was my thing, is I'm not going to spend any more money on that. But, you know, you always got friends. You know, you always have your drinking people that are like, "Oh, come on, just have a couple. We'll buy. You don't even have to buy." And you go, and the next thing you know, it's 3:30 a.m., and the bar's closing, and you're trying to make your way home, and you're completely trashed. You know that you have to go to church because you just made this promise, you know, and so you go to church, and you're standing there holding onto the chair in front of me, and, you know, I had a lot of people from church just get completely fed up with it and walked away from it. It was like, whatever, just do your thing.
So you just keep going through the sandstone heart kind of thing, and somebody invites you to a discipleship walk?
Yeah, you know, a lot of time passed from that, and I had started going to the chapel. Somebody had invited me to go to the chapel, and I had kind of burned some bridges where I was at the church where I was at, and I thought, well, what better time to start a new church? And I did. I went, and the drinking subsided except for weekends, and then it would be, I would go on Saturday night so that we could go out after the service. And I justified it. It's like, it's not a problem because I'm still going to church. I'm still reading my Bible every day, and I'm doing my small group, and I'm doing all this stuff. So, God, it's okay. You know, it's good. My kids are being taken care of. And you know, I was at small group, and they asked me about going on a discipleship walk. And, you know, I remember going to small group, and I would have a drink before I'd go. And it was, I can't even, I wasn't drunk, but I would go, I'd have a drink. And they invited me to go on the walk, and I said, no, I don't want to. No, it's okay. It's okay. It's all good. And she asked me over and over and over. And I actually got by one whole year. I didn't go. The next year started rolling around, and they started asking me again. And I said, okay, fine, I'll go. And I thought, well, by the time it comes up, I'll figure out a way to get out of it. Well, the time came up, and she then said, well, I've already paid half of your fee. How do you say no? How do you back out of that? So I go on the discipleship walk, and
What are you doing about alcohol on that front? Like, are you worried you're not going to have it, or?
yeah, exactly. I'm like, I am so out of my box. What am I going to do? I can't have a phone. They already said you can't take cell phones. I know I can't take alcohol. And this starts on a Thursday night. I started packing and starting to throw my stuff together on Monday night, and every night, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night, even Thursday night, between work and going to the start of this discipleship walk, I'm drinking. And I've now switched to vodka, flavored vodka, and I'm drinking. And you know, I'm like, I'll just get through this weekend. It'll be fine. I'll get through this weekend. And I'm even contemplating whether or not there was a slick way to take a bottle of this flavored vodka on this weekend trip and not get caught. And I didn't. This camp that they had the walk at that year just happened to be a camp that my boys had attended since they were old enough to go to camp. It was a healing place for my boys after the divorce.
What's ironic is it's going to become a healing place for you.
Yeah, so I'm there on this walk, and I know no one except for a couple of the leaders. One is my life group leader. So we do our seminars, and I'm sitting at the table. I don't participate with my girls at all. I listen to these little sermonettes, these little things, and I'm just sitting there. People will talk to me, and I'm just like saying very little. I just can't wait for Sunday to get here. If I can figure out a ride before that, I'm leaving. So Saturday we do, I believe it was Saturday morning, we had a break, and one of my table leaders said, "So aren't you glad you came?" And I said, "Not really." And she
Didn't know how
had
to,
this,
yeah.
she didn't even know what to say, and she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I just think it's a waste of my time." And she's like, she's a pretty upbeat person, and she said, "Well, that's too bad, because we're really happy to have you at our table." And I said, "Well, I just can't wait till Sunday." So we do our break, we come back, and our table decides to do a skit in which one person has to play Jesus. And guess who they picked to play Jesus?
You.
Yes. So as I'm doing this skit portraying Jesus, I don't know what happened, but God started breaking me. And I got back to the table, and it was all I could do to not cry. And everybody's like, "You did an awesome job." And I mean, we had a standing ovation. I mean, the skit really turned out good. And I'm can't get that robe off fast enough. And I'm just sitting there, and I don't really participate a whole lot from the rest of that Saturday. And Saturday nights when they do the candlelight walk, and
you're feeling now that you have a problem.
I'm feeling now that there might be some changes I need to make in my life.
And alcohol's at the forefront of it.
The alcohol, the bitterness, the anger, all that rage, all that shame, all that, all of it. And I think primarily the alcohol. And in the midst of this alcohol use, I'd started using a lot of prescription drugs, and overusing a lot of prescription drugs. I was using them to sleep, then I was using them for everything. And then I'd tell the doctor that they weren't working, so he'd give me more. And I think he just started breaking me. And I sat at my table. This time it wasn't really sitting there with an attitude. It was just very, very quiet. And we had our candlelight walk. And I remember as we're walking through this candlelight walk, and I don't know if you've ever, you know what the discipleship walk is at all, and the candlelight walk, where you're walking between hundreds of people at night holding candles, singing. It was all I could do to get through it, to get into this main room where all the disciples sat down. And I had a complete breakdown when I sat down. On top of the fact that I saw people I knew from other churches as I passed them. And all I can remember is several people asking me if I was okay. And I said no. And I'm crying for probably the first time in a really, really long time. And actually my life group leader came over and talked to me, and she said, I don't remember everything that happened that night. She said that I kept saying that I can't cry. I'm not allowed to cry. And God can never forgive what I've done. And little did I know that he can forgive all that, and he can renew, and he can just transform you. And we did our last little service before we left for the weekend was where people would go up and give their testimony of the weekend, what the weekend meant to them. And everybody went up, and I sat there, and I'm not going up there. No way, I'm not going up there. And I remember the spiritual leader at that time was standing there. It was Amy Beam, standing there at the pulpit, and she said, "Is there anyone else that wants to come up here? Because if there is, I will stand by you." And I have no idea. I stood up and walked up there as bold as I could get out, and basically confessed that I had a drinking problem and that I had actually drank up to the night I left. Tried to figure out how to bring alcohol on the trip, and then, you know, and as I went to sit back down in my row with my ladies that I'd been spending all week with, they're all sobbing. And they said that they were all in the bathroom praying for me when I had my breakdown at the candlelight walk. I had no idea.
So God was at work.
God was definitely at work.
Through them, in you. That's powerful.
It is amazing. And, you know, I left the walk, which is really strange. You know, God's trying to work in me, and somebody said to me, so this is day one of no more drinking. And I said, crazy as it is, well, I might still drink with Christian friends, but I'm not going to keep alcohol in the house anymore. And
justifying kind of a rule that'll make it all still be good for you.
If I drink with Christian people, then it's probably all good, and I won't get carried away. So, but and I remember people looking at me like, "You really?"
Is that what you did?
I did. I went home, and I met with a lady. She's actually one of my very favorite accountability partners, and she's also a recovering alcoholic for over 20 years. And she just kind of took me under her wing. She was one of the spiritual advisors on my walk, and she kind of just took over. And we started meeting, and I said, you know, I haven't decided if I'm gonna really just stop drinking completely, but until I decide, until God gives me a sign, I'm not gonna drink. So I think that's fair. I'm just gonna wait for God to give me some big giant sign. And she just looked at me like, okay, I'll just pray for you. And I go home, and I have all these flavored vodkas in my freezer, and you know, I'm not drinking, I'm not touching them. I mean, and I prayed the most ridiculous prayers. God, I want to slam the freezer door, and when I slam the freezer door, if you can make them all fall out, I will stop drinking. I promise I will never touch it again. Ridiculous prayers.
And you'd actually slam it and
I
see if they would fall
literally
out?
go out into the kitchen and slam the freezer door, waiting on them to fall out and shatter and make this unbelievable mess. That never happened. Instead, we had a guest preacher at the chapel. His name is Luther Whitfield.
Luther Whitfield.
Came to the chapel one night, and he preaches this sermon, and it's funny because no one else heard the line on any of the services except me this one night. And I had friends come to me, and I was at that service, and I listened to that sermon, and I listened for that line that you said he said, but I never heard it. So God must have just said it for you. I don't know. But in the sermon, all I remember him saying is, apparently someone said it, if anything is standing in your way and it's in your life that's keeping you from having that straight line to God, it's got to go. It's got to go. Because your relationship with God will never be what it can really be if you've got anything standing in the way of that. God has to be first and foremost. And I'm sitting there in my pew. I'm like, that's my sign.
That's your sign.
That's my sign.
And I think you wrote the sobriety date on
your hand. I did. I
hand.
went back to the first day of the discipleship walk, because I actually hadn't had a drink since the night before, and I counted that as my day one. And I did, for the first year, on my left palm, I wrote what day I was on. And I had people come up to me that I had no idea who they were and said, let me see your palm. Let me see your palm. What day are you on? People were calling me. People were texting me. People were taking me under their wing. People that had already had their struggles with alcohol. And it was phenomenal. I did my first cardboard testimony 60-some days into sobriety at the chapel on Easter Sunday. And
what did it say?
My life was a mess, and I was using alcohol to drown it and to get through life. And
then you flip it, and it says...
I flipped it, and it was said how many days sobriety. And I remember my youngest son was home. Both of my boys are in the military now, and my youngest son was home and in town and at the service the first time around. And I remember he was sitting pretty close off to the side, and I remember looking over at him, and he was sobbing.
Mm.
And, you think your kids don't know? My kids knew.
Yeah.
My kids knew.
And I think you went through Called to Obedience for a year, right?
I did.
So you've been discipled?
Yes, I was discipled by an amazing coach for over a year. I went through Called to Obedience while I'm going to Celebrate Recovery. I am now co-leading a step study. I've been through it twice, and now I'm co-leading a group. And while I was in my Call to Obedience, my coach had said, I wrote an article on a lady one time, quite a while back. She was a graduate of a place called the Redemption House. And she has an amazing testimony. But they have Celebrate Recovery there on Friday nights within the house with the ladies that are there. And I said, she explained this was a transitional house. Most of the ladies are on house arrest, but this lady, her name is Marisa Hanlon, and she runs Celebrate Recovery there, and I think that you guys would hit it off. So I went, and I had never met Marisa before in my life, nor has she ever met me. We'd had some conversations on the phone. I walked in the door, our eyes locked, and we knew who the other was immediately. And I haven't stopped going to Celebrate Recovery at the Redemption House since.
And now you're leading
I now
recovery
co-lead
groups.
Celebrate Recovery there. Take the ladies through the Celebrate Recovery and also the 12-step program. I do one-on-one mentoring as they're going through the 12 steps. I do that at Redemption House. Transitions, the Karis House, Hope House, and Martha's Place. And I am just overwhelmed sometimes at what has transpired since that discipleship walk. And I sit in the midst of these ladies hearing tremendous stories that I can't even wrap my mind around, and watch the transformation happen in their lives. I have a front row seat to transformation, and it's amazing. I'm sometimes the only one that they've ever told their story to.
Yeah.
And I sit there and I listen to their story, and it's about building trust with them.
Amen.
And being their voice.
Dianna, the Apostle Paul says that God restores us. I'm paraphrasing, but God restores us to bring his restoration to others, to be used by him. And you can say two of the most powerful words in ministry as you lead Celebrate Recovery, me too. And
Yes.
I just want to thank you for what you are doing, for who you are, for surrendering what you were holding back, and for being used by God for your ultimate value to bring his restoration to others. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
So I want to ask you today to take the Romans 6 challenge. I'd like you to memorize Romans 6, 12 through 14. Romans 6:12 says, "Do not offer any part of yourself to sin as an instrument of wickedness, but rather offer yourselves to God as those who have been brought from death to life, and offer every part of yourself to him as an instrument of righteousness." Paul goes on in Romans 6:14 to say, "For sin shall no longer be your master, because you are not under the law, but under grace." You can remember grace in an acronym. Its definition is God's righteousness at Christ's expense. Our prayer for you today is that you would surrender anything that you're holding back from God that's hindering your intimacy with him, and that you would no longer allow sin to have mastery over you, because by God's grace you can have the power to be free from that burden, from whatever addiction may be in your life. And God can heal you and restore you and make you new again, and use you to bring his restoration to others.